Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. Yeah, we're going to be looking at Exodus 32, and we'll really cover the whole chapter, but I want to camp out mainly on verses 1 through 6. I don't need it. It's okay. It's all good. Thanks. If you would, I'd like to start with a word of prayer because I need God's help. We all do, right? And so I want to make sure that He goes to work in here this evening, and that we let Him. And so I want to say a prayer about that. If you'll pray with me, please. God, we thank you that you have drawn us here, and that we've responded to your influence to come here to learn and engage and devote time to you. We love you, and we are thankful for all that you do for us and who you are. And we seek you to work in our hearts and our minds. Help us to learn from your word and move forward in our walk with you and be closer to you. And I pray that we'll leave here changed, that we'll learn something in here that will carry with us moving forward as we continue to walk with you and with the time that you give us here. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So what I'm going to do is do a little explaining about my title here. This title has 4 meanings all at the same time, and I'm going to just hit you with all 4 of these meanings here. One is, leading in /2, leading into sin is one is maybe this is about Aaron leading the people into sin, right? He's leading them into sin because of the golden calf. Another one is, that's a possible meaning, is Aaron is leading the people in the midst of their sin, right? Leading the people they're in sin and he's leading them, right? And then looking at myself, and you do the same, is what do I take away from this? How do I lead myself? How do I direct my own life by turning against my sin? I have a sin nature. How do I lead myself in my sin and turn against that to obey God? Right? And so that's leading in sin by leading away from it. And then God is directing me. God is leading me in my sin nature. I have a sin nature, and God's leading me in this life here while I have this sin nature and living in this sinful world. And it could be about that. So that's 4 meanings there. 2 are about Aaron, and 2 were about us. And I guess the last one is God's doing the leading. All right. So a lot of meanings there in that one title. And what I want to do is I want to start off with reading verses 1 through 6, and then I'm going to summarize chunks of the rest of the chapter there. So you can follow along in your Bible. And what I want to do is read to you verses 1 through 6, a translation straight from the Hebrew. Most of it will line up what you find in the King James, but there are a few places that I'm going exactly by what the Hebrew says, and it requires explanation, and I won't get into all that. So most of the time it should line up exactly with the King James, so you should be able to follow no problem. So verse 1, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said, Up, make us a god who shall go before us, for as this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what is become of him. And Aaron said to them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them unto Aaron. And he received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it a molten calf, not after, and made it a molten calf. And they said, This is thy God, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to make merry. Engage in revelry is what it really means there. Now I'm going to summarize verses 7 through 14. There is some repeated material in here, so I don't need to read all of those. And so verses 7 through 14, that chunk God is telling Moses, go down because your people have corrupted themselves. God tells Moses what the people did and told Moses that these people are stiff-necked. And he tells Moses that he's going to destroy the people, but then Moses, of course, intercedes on their behalf, and God repents. He turns from his decision to destroy the people. That's verses 7 through 14 in a nutshell. Verses 15 to 20, well, Moses comes down the mountain, and with the tablets that God had engraved in his own hand, and the word engraved there is the same as the tool, from the same word that Aaron had with the golden calf, the engraving tool, by the way. On the way down the mountain, he met Joshua on the way down. Joshua went with him when they went up, and came. Joshua stayed partway up the mountain. God directed only Moses to go to the very top. And so Joshua went with him, but Joshua didn't go all the way to the top. So on the way down, Moses meets Joshua, and then they're headed back to the camp. And as they're approaching the camp, Joshua, being the military leader that he is, he hears these loud sounds, and he thinks, oh no, the camp has been attacked, and there's a battle going on, is what it sounds like to him. And they keep approaching, of course, and then Moses sees the calf and the frivolity going on, and he became furious like God was when Moses was still on the mountain and God told him what happened. God was furious. Well, now Moses is furious, and he broke these tablets, and he burnt the calf and pulverized it, poured water all over it, and made the people to drink it. And so that's what verses 15 to 20 is talking about. And then 21 to 27, after dealing with the people, dealing with this situation, putting a stop to this incident, now Moses directs his attention to Aaron, and he said, what did these people do to you that led to this incident this has happened here? What did they do to you? And he pleaded with Moses, Aaron pleaded with Moses, please don't be angry at me. And then he retells what happened in verses 1 through 5, right? He retells the whole story, but he provides a little bit more detail this time. As he's explaining what happened, recounting what happened, he says that I put the gold into the fire and out popped this calf, right? So that's verses 21 to 27. And then the chapter concludes with Moses is instructing the Levites to punish the people who were really the main instigators, I suppose. And so, acting under the instruction of Moses, the Levites kill about 3,000 men. Moses blesses the Levites, and then he addresses the people again and telling them, you've committed a great sin. And then he goes back up the mountain again and intercedes for the people, asking God to forgive them. God extends mercy, but he promises to hold them accountable later. And that really is the entire chapter in a nutshell there. And so what I'd like to do is really go into a deep dive with verses 1 through 6 and help you to know some things that maybe would dispel some common misunderstandings that we have about this incident. And then, of course, I want to direct this so that we have a practical application from what we learn out of here, not just learning facts from this. So the first thing is in verse 1, and I want to talk about this word delay here. So backing up, we've been in Exodus for a while now, and so I want to back up. Exodus chapter 12, God commands the Israelites to change their calendar. Okay, the first month of the Exodus is now your new year. That's the first month of your year. This is such a huge thing. I want you to change your calendar now. That the first month of the year is a reminder to you that's when the Exodus took place. This would be in the month of what they call Nisan. So he told them to change their calendar. In Exodus 19, it says in the third month of this new calendar system, in the third month, that month is called Sivan, they came to Sinai and encamped before the mount. And the traditional understanding in the Talmud, in the Midrash, and just the Jews have this traditional understanding that God gave the Torah or gave the law on the 6th day of Sivan. So this third month on the 6th day. And they argue about whether it was the 6th or the 7th, but nobody has a question. It's either the 6th or the 7th day of the month of that Sivan, which would have been about early June. And for the year, around 1446 BC, okay? And Jasher 82.6, verse 6, confirms this timeline. And so, as I said, this would have been the third month of their first year coming out of the Exodus. They're coming out of Egypt. This would have been around early June and around the year 1446 BC. So Exodus 12 changed the calendar. Exodus 19 lets us know this is happening in the third month. Exodus 24, Moses and Joshua, as I said before, they went up this mountain and Joshua went only part of the way. And so what's happening here is when he went up the mountain, we're at the part where he's already been up the mountain. And so that's what we miss if we're just looking at chapter 32. We forget, well, what's been going on here? And way back in Exodus 24 is when he went up the mountain. And it says back in Exodus chapter 24 that he was up there 40 days. The people experienced a delay. That means that they had some expectation when he would come back, right? And if you look at the ancient rabbis and their commentaries from the ancient times, and in the Talmud, there was the understanding that Moses told them, I'm going to be gone for 40 days. And so they knew ahead of time that it was going to be 40 days. And so if we go to this next slide, this will hopefully try to explain what God told Moses to do and what the people understood. You can see there in blue that Moses left. Let's just say that he left on the 7th of that month. The 40 days doesn't count the day that he left, but the people thought it did. Does that make sense? So they're expecting him to be back on the 16th. If you look in the reddish shaded, they're thinking he's going to be back on the 16th because he told them, I'm going to be gone 40 days and 40 nights, and I'll come back. I'm going to be up there talking with God on the mountain for 40 days. And it says he was up there 40. It doesn't explicitly say that he told them that. But delay and the fact that it's there kind of lets you know they had an understanding that he was be back on, let's say, the 16th of Tammuz is that month there. And he knew all along, and Aaron knew all along, that he was going to come back on the 17th. So the people miscalculated. And that's what all the rabbis say, that the people miscalculated the timing. They assumed that he had promised to come back on that day. And, I guess a good analogy would be, I always have trouble with this, like when I go out of town to hold the mail. Hold the mail. The last day of the service, is that when it's going to be delivered, or is that the last day it's going to be held? It makes a difference, right? I mean, because if you miscalculate, your mail gets delivered and you're still out of town, and that's kind of what's going on here, if that makes any sense, right? And so, but hopefully you're getting a sense there. This isn't like he just flaked out on them. It was one day's difference. I mean, they followed him through the Red Sea. They followed him. He's met all their needs. They're clearly being directed by God. They know this, and they can't wait even one day. Even if they were right, they can't even wait one day. And then you can get even more specific with it here, because the word for delay, we don't do this in English, but in Hebrew, they don't have the vowels. And so the word for delay, if you change the vowels around, keep the same consonants as the voshesh means delay, the vashish means sixth, okay? And so sixth means not just what day they thought he'd be back, but they thought he would be back at noon, the 6th hour, okay? And so you could read it this way. The people saw that Moses delayed descending the mountain. Sure, you could read it that way. But another way of reading it, because the vowels aren't there in the letters, the people saw that the 6th hour had come and Moses hadn't descended the mountain. So there's one interpretation, it's all about delay. They didn't wait for a day. They didn't even wait for the right time for him to come back. These people were looking for an excuse they didn't really want to follow him anyway. They were looking for an excuse to go rogue, to rebel, and to go into idolatry there is what we find. They were either impatient or insincere or probably some combination. And so, if you remember, I mean, this is only about 40 days later is when this is happening here. And he was very clear. Moses told them, wait here until I come back. And that's what the Bible says. And other sources say that he told them up front that it was 40 days. You can read in Exodus 24, it tells you that he was there 40 days. And so, he said, wait here until I come back. And then don't miss this. He's not there, so he left Aaron and Hur in charge to deal with things. If any issue came up, any conflict, any decision that needed to be made, he didn't give them moral authority. There's only God gave Moses that kind of authority, but Moses put Aaron and Hur in charge, basically to babysit while he's up there on the mount communing with God. Okay, and you wait until I come back, and Aaron and Hur are in charge. And of course, it says that he remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. So he comes back on the 17th of Tammuz. Now, when we get to verse 1 of Exodus 32, he hadn't returned when they expected him to come back. He came back on God's time. He came back on the time that he understood and the time that Aaron and Hur understood. But the moment that he didn't come back when they supposedly expected, that's when they demand from Aaron to make a god for them. And I don't want you to miss this. You might want to write this down. All of this stuff is happening 90 days after Passover. Here they are in Egypt. Put the blood on the doorpost. God passes through and spares anybody that had the blood on the doorpost. That was only 3 months before this happened here. 90 days, okay, is how much time has passed. I can tell you not just months, days. 90 days. The 15th of Nisan was Passover, and this is happening on the 16th of Tammuz. That's only 90 days. They saw God spare their firstborn. They saw the Red Sea part and walked on dry land, all that, and in 90 days they're doing this. That's just shocking to me how anybody could turn like that, right? So one question that comes to my mind is, I've mentioned Hur a few times. Well, where is he during all this, okay? Just to recap, in Exodus 17, you can read about it. In Exodus 17, verses 10 through 12, Aaron and Hur held up Moses' arms during this battle with Amalek. They're helping him to hold his arms up. And in Exodus 24, when Moses is going to go up the mountain, he puts Aaron and Hur in charge. So where is this guy? I mean, he is, it's not Aaron by himself left in charge. Aaron and Hur are in charge. And so his absence, the Bible doesn't tell us what is happening to him or did happen, but the silence, the absence of this guy at Exodus 32 is striking. Something happened to him. This wasn't years in the past. This was 40 days ago. Why would Moses put him in charge and then he's not there helping out, right? It's his responsibility to do that. So I can tell you there are a lot of different sources from ancient times. The Midrash Tanchuma Kitisa 19 verse 2 says this, that when Moses supposedly failed to return by noon on the 40th day, the people revolted. Aaron and Hur told them that Moses was on his way down the mountain because they knew the correct timing. They understood it, but the people didn't care. They didn't want to listen to Aaron and Hur. Hur stepped forward and rebuked them. They turned against him and killed him. And according to the ancient traditions, the Hur is the first person in the Bible who was martyred for the faith. And so when Aaron witnessed this, he tried to occupy them with other matters, to distract them, right? And so, but the people cried out all the more. They demanded Aaron to make them a god to replace Moses, and they had killed Hur. And according to Jasher 82:13, they threatened to murder Aaron as well. In Jasher 82:13, it's similar to what we find in Exodus 32. They say, rise up, make us a god to guide us. But they add this, so that you don't die. If you don't do this, we're going to kill you just like we did Hur. Now, the Exodus doesn't say that Hur was executed or he was killed, but the rabbis believe that, and it makes sense. Where was he then, right? If he wasn't killed, where was he? So now I want to get into the Aaron's response to all this. So hopefully you can see that this is an impossible situation. These people are revolting. It's definitely a violent mob, no doubt about it. And how many people are we talking about here? There were 2 million people total. And so I don't know how many of them would have been participating, but it's a lot of people, and they're violent for sure. They're not just saying, will you please do this? They demand him to get up and make them a god. Okay. All right, so what is Aaron going to do here? If you look at verse 2, he tells them, break off the golden earrings that are in your ears. The word that's for break off is in Hebrew, parak. And it's this idea of ripping it out, tearing it out of your ear. It's a violent, abrupt, it would be very painful what he's asking them to do, right? To snatch the earrings out of your ear. And of course, where would these slaves have had all this gold in the first place? They'd been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. So where would they have had all this gold anyway? Well, this is the gold that was plundered from Egypt, right? And so they had this gold from Egypt, and God hadn't told them yet what he wanted them to do with it, so they didn't know that it was for the temple. They didn't know that, but still, he said to rip it out of your ears, not just your ear, your wives, your sons, and your daughters. So he means everybody here. He means everybody. He's trying to tell them to do something that he's hoping that would discourage them from going forward, right? Who would want to snatch earrings out of their ears? And how long would it take to collect that many earrings, right? I mean, he's delaying things. He knows that Moses is going to come back, and so soon, and he's trying to stall the people there, okay? And so he's trying to discourage them from parting with their gold, from hurting themselves. And then notice in verse 3, it says, all the people took off their gold earrings. So, he's trying to create a delay tactic. It failed because the people did. They did quickly, instantly take their earrings off, snatch them off, and gave it to him quicker than he expected it to take place. So then delay tactic number 2, if we can go to the next slide. I've got this golden calf slide here. It's I made it this way on purpose. So it's the people are in darkness because they're lost. They're reprobate mind there, and they've made this golden calf. And so verse number 4 there's some key words in here: engraving tool and molten calf, and they said, these are your gods. Those are some things that I want to unpack here. The word chedet means engraving tool, and I have a little visual image here. So this is a straight razor that I use here, but this would be like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to mow my grass with this thing here, okay? That means I don't really want to mow my grass, right? Because it's never going to get done. This thing is going to get dull, and I'm going to have to strop it and sharpen it and hone it and all that stuff. And plus, it would take 1,000,000 years for me to mow a lawn with this thing. He's using an engraving tool to form a molten calf. It's never going to get done, right? And so this is where it's really important to look at the Hebrew very carefully, because it says in the King James that he used this tool after he had molded the calf. But it doesn't say that. It says that he used this tool so he used this tool in the process of trying to make this calf. The King James isn't wrong. It could mean that. But when you look at the context, it's really clearly he's trying to stall the people there. So, and then, molten calf. I mean, you know what that is. I mean, it's melting all this gold down. And so he's using this tool, this chisel, if you will, or a stylus, in the process of making this molten calf. And then, so delay tactic number 2 failed because the calf emerged from this fire. So that was the second attempt to try to stall the people there. Verse 5, here's another delay tactic, number 3. He built an altar. And we could think, well, that's terrible. Why is he building an altar? Shame on him. He built this, he's 83-year-old man, and he builds an altar by himself, okay? He gathered the stones. And I can show you a slide here of a place that people think is where all this happened. The next slide here, I think. This is where people think maybe this incident occurred. I don't know about that, but yeah. So he to make an altar, he would have had to gather these stones and arrange them to make the altar. This would take a long time. Okay, I mean, he's doing it by himself. It doesn't say a whole bunch of people helped. He did it by himself, and he's 83-year-old man there. And so if you were to think about what's happened so far, Hur is absent, so maybe they killed him quickly. collecting gold earrings from about 2 million people. Just be conservative, a couple hours. I mean, it happened faster than they thought. This whole thing is starting to happen around noontime. And so give it a couple hours. Building a fire to melt that much gold from however many people, this was a lot of people. Building a fire that's hot enough to melt gold, that much gold, because all these people gave their earrings. Just think about it, right? I mean, that would take, even if you were very conservative, and it said less than an hour. And then building an altar. He's by himself gathering these stones to build this altar. Few hours there. I mean, if you were really, really conservative, you're talking almost 6 hours to do all this stuff. For the people to revolt, to collect the earrings, to build the fire, to melt the gold, the calf springs forth, and he builds this altar. 6 hours is extremely conservative. And then so all that failed. So here's the fourth delay tactic. Tomorrow will be the feast for God. Tomorrow. And notice he says it's for God, not for the calf. Okay? He's never going to bow down to worship this calf. He knew that Moses was going to return on that day when he says tomorrow. And you don't want to miss this. Many of the feasts, including the Passover, are in the evening time. They're in the evening time. So if this took about 6 hours on the conservative side, then it would have been evening. Why not just go right on and have the feast, right? But they didn't. He said, tomorrow we're going to do this, okay? Tomorrow morning. So there's 4 times that this guy is trying to stall the people to prevent them from engaging in idolatry there. He's trying. He's in an impossible situation there, and he's trying to stall them, hoping that Moses would come back. Why? Because Moses is the one who had the authority to deal with the people. Aaron didn't. He was there to settle matters of dispute is what he was there for. He didn't have the authority to come in there like Jesus did, clearing the temple. How could one man clear the temple multiple times as he did? He had the authority from God to do that, right? Now, not everybody could do that. And so the people, verse 6, they rose early the next day, it says, okay? And so this is the day that Moses is supposed to come back, but they got up early. And early, I mean, it doesn't say what time, but this would be just before sunrise, maybe, okay? Or right around sunrise. And then they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. All this would have happened before noon, and they engaged in this revelry before noon there. And notice that the order, I think that the order is on purpose there. Burnt offerings, then peace offerings, okay? Burnt offering is the whatever they offered on the altar is entirely consumed. There's nothing left of it. Nobody eats anything. It's completely burned up on the altar. And this is symbolizing the people's complete devotion to this calf. Complete, they're all in. And they're using an offering that's supposed to be for God, and they perverted it because now they're making it for this calf. They're doing the same thing that they would do for God, but they're applying it to this calf. They're all in, completely devoted to this calf is what the burnt offering symbolizes. And then the peace offering, which is also supposed to be for God, it's a shared meal that's celebrated between the people doing the offering and the priests. That's important to know what it is. This is symbolizing fellowship with God. And what you notice here is that Aaron's not mentioned. Aaron's been mentioned repeatedly, and now he's not mentioned. The lack of him is letting you know he wasn't participating in any of this, okay? He did everything that he could to postpone this. I have another slide here that's a painting of from the 19th century of this golden calf incident there. Going on to verse 4, we get the people's idolatry there. So after Aaron used this engraving tool to fashion the molten calf, it says, they said, "This is thy God, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." So a logical question is, well, who are they? Why would the Israelites be talking to themselves, right? And even if they were, why would they talk to themselves that way? So that's where we want to go back to context. Exodus chapter 12, verse 38 is saying, there was a mixed multitude went with the Israelites out of Egypt. And that's why if you look at verse 7, God tells Moses to go down the mountain, he says, your people, not my people, your people. My people are my people, the Israelites. Your people are these people that you allowed to come along. Does that make sense? The mixed multitude. And they could have been Egyptians, they could have been recent converts, that kind of thing. Who knows who they could have been? There's different speculation about that. But they're not Israelite people. That's the mixed multitude. So that's why God says they're your people. You brought them out of Egypt. And the other thing is that this is highlighting the distance that's created between God and these people as well because of their sin, what they've done there. And the Bible does not say that Moses rolled out the red carpet for the mixed multitude, but Moses is the leader, he's in charge, and they came, so he let it happen. I mean, right? He's responsible. It doesn't specify that he commanded them to come or anything like that, but they're there. It says they're there, and he's in charge, so he let them. Makes sense, right? So these people engaged in perverted worship, the burnt offerings and peace offerings to the calf, and so God is letting Moses know what the people had done, and that's in verses 7 and 8, and God decides he's going to destroy them for that, and of course I've already mentioned that Moses intercedes, and you'll notice that whereas God says these are your people, when Moses is talking to God, he says these are your people, right? So that's something that's important there, and God decides not to destroy the people. And Moses comes down the mountain. He starts coming down, and these 2 tablets are in his hand, and he met Joshua. Already mentioned that. Loud noise, war. No, I'm hearing singing. It's not a war. I'm hearing singing. And then this is really interesting here, when he's in verses 15 through 18, when he says, "No, I'm hearing singing." That word for singing is in Hebrew anot, and it's not just I hear singing. It's a kind of singing that he's hearing. It's a kind of singing that they used in worship. It's antiphonal singing, call and response, that you have the people like the Levites leading in worship and the people respond. I sing something and you sing it back. That kind of call and response, that's the word that's being used here. So again, burnt offerings, peace offering, those are offerings that you use for worshiping God, but they're being used for the calf. Even this kind of singing here is a kind of singing that's for God in the tabernacle and later the temple, but it's now being used for this revelry and this idolatry, worshiping this calf, right? So they're kicking God out and trying to replace God with this calf here. So what did Moses do here when all this erupted? In verses 19 and 20, is when he gets closer to the town, he sees the calf, the dancing, the revelry, all the frivolity, and became furious, as I mentioned a moment ago. He broke the tablets, and I said that he destroyed the calf by fire. So it was formed by fire. He destroys it by fire. And then he grinds it into a powder and poured water all over it and made the Israelites drink of it. There's a lot of different speculation why he did that, and I'm not going to go into all of the different reasons, but what I can tell you is that what he commanded them to do, first of all, notice that he was able to do it, okay, because he had the authority. He took care of this really quick. He didn't have to do any delay tactic. He just did it. He dealt with it, okay, because he had the authority and the power from God to do that. But regardless of the speculation as to why he had them drink this powder that had the golden calf pulverized, what you can know for sure is that by ingesting this, it removed all traces of this idol. He completely obliterated it. It's not there anymore. Okay, it's not just melted down, it's gone. And then the other thing is this act that he required of them made them literally internalize their sin. They're ingesting their sin now. And then the other is what happens after you drink. I mean, this idol became human waste, is what he did. So those are things that you can be for sure happened on account of what Moses required of them. And then, as I mentioned, that after dealing with the people, putting a stop to that immediately, that was the immediate thing that had to be taken care of. Now he comes to Aaron, and he says, what did these people do to you? This again, you don't want to miss, he's not accusing Aaron of doing something wrong. He's asking, what did they do to you that this happened? So he's acknowledging that Aaron was acting under duress. He knows that. And so again, it's this none of this would have happened if Moses hadn't let those people go along in the first place, right? So we can criticize Aaron, but Moses is God wanted to deliver his people out of Egypt. He didn't say anything about these other people to come along. Moses allowed that to happen. And if he hadn't allowed that to happen, then none of this would have happened, because these are the people that instigated it, right, in the first place. They're the ones that said, make us a God. Here is your God, O Israel. It's the non-Israelite people that started this whole mess. Those are the people that Moses allowed to go in the first place. So Aaron responds to Moses, as I said, by pleading, please don't be angry with me. You know that these people are set on evil. And at first it seems like that's an excuse that he's making. And maybe it is. Kind of like what Adam did. This wife that you gave me made me do this. I mean, it could be that he's making an excuse. But I also think that that he's asking Moses for some understanding. You know, I was in an impossible situation. I didn't have the authority that you have. I had judicial authority, but I didn't have the prophetic, moral authority that you had. And so have a little understanding. He's asking for that. And then he says here in verse 24, put the gold in, and out comes this calf. And the word is yatsah, means to spring forth, just to hop out of there instantly. I mean, it would take time to fashion the calf, you melt the gold down and all that. It would take time to do that. And what he's saying here is, I just threw these earrings in and pop, out comes this calf, right? And so, well, one question is, well, he's got to be lying, right? I mean, he's got to be telling a lie or using figurative language. Maybe that's it. It's a metaphor. But one question is, well, why would he lie? He's had a perfect track record. He has been giving a factual, chronological account of what's happened here. So why would he lie? And then there's nothing in the syntax of the Hebrew that suggests any figurative speech. There's no metaphors in here. He's speaking literally. He's speaking, either he's lying or he's telling the truth. There's no figurative speech. And before and after this incident, Aaron maintained a solid reputation for integrity. So another question is, if he is telling a lie, why would he tell the truth? I threw this gold in, but then he lies about the outcome. Why would he do that? And then, why would he lie about something that could be so easily verified? Right? Why would he tell a lie about that? I mean, that's a really poor choice for a lie. That's a lame excuse there. It's easy to check that that's a lie. So why would he lie about that? So then that leaves the other choices that maybe he's not telling a lie and he's telling the truth. So then how could you throw gold, that much gold, into this fire and out pops a golden calf? How in the world could you do that? That leads us to think, well, maybe this was a supernatural thing. Okay, and so that's where we have some other sources that tell us about that. And then the Midrash, there's Midrash Zohar Kitisa, that says, when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down the mountain, that word people denotes the mixed multitude, it says, and the mixed multitude consisted of sorcerers and magicians from Egypt. They saw God working all these miracles, and then the Israelites are leaving. I want to go with that. I want to see that some more. They don't have a heart change, but they want to be around that. Okay, that's what this is suggesting here. And so why are they called mixed multitude? It's because they consisted of all different kind of grades of the Egyptian magicians. And, you know, we have the two leaders were Jannes and Jambres there, and I have a slide for that as well. This is coming from a Syriac Bible all the way back to the 6th century there. And those two guys that I've circled at the back are representations of Jannes and Jambres. They're mentioned in 2 Timothy 3:8. But it just says that they withstood Moses. And then they're also mentioned in the book of Jasher, chapter 79, verse 27. They're mentioned there as well. So, you know, what possibly happened here is the word voshesh, delay, or 6th hour. This is when this is happening here. You've got this source is saying 40,000 people were in the mixed multitude. We don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us, but that's what this ancient source says. 40,000 people assembled to leave Egypt with the Israelites, and among those 40,000 were these magicians. Two of them, named Jannes and Jambres, mentioned by name there in all these ancient sources, and of course in 2 Timothy 3:8 as well. So, and then this Midrash goes on to say that Aaron tossed their earrings into the fire, and the magicians approached and performed magical feats. Then the calf came forth leaping. right? So this is the same word in the Bible, sprung forth, right? I threw in these earrings and out springs this calf, right? And so, well, how could that happen? Well, magic, sorcery. And we know that those magicians did sorcery because they copied the same things that Moses was doing. Remember that earlier in Exodus? So further evidence that this calf was supernaturally formed, about 2 million people there. It says all the people brought forth their gold earrings to Aaron. So at least we could say many, if not most, of the people gave their gold. Archaeological evidence demonstrates that the Egyptian gold earrings from that time period weighed about 4 to 10 grams for a pair. Okay, so on a very, very conservative estimate, if you said that only 2% of the people participated in this, 2% of 2 million people, that would be about 600 pounds of gold, if only 2% participated, okay? And I think it's more than that because it said all the people did this. I think it's more than just 2%. Even if we said 25% participated, 500,000 people out of 2 million, that would be 4 tons of gold that was thrown into this fire. And then you think, how in the world could they have done that? What's the melting point of gold? 1,947 degrees Fahrenheit. Getting the fire that hot would have taken hours to get it that hot to melt the gold. And melting 600 pounds would take at least 2 hours. Melting 4 tons would take the better part of a day or more, at least, at the very least. This is in the ancient times here. They didn't have all the equipment that we have today. So the entire incident, the rebellion, the calf, the altar, proclaiming the feast, all that occurred in the space of an afternoon. And this further supports what Aaron is saying had to be true, that this calf just burst out of the fire, right? I mean, how could it be any other way? And then if you think about these, if those magicians and sorcerers were among the mixed multitude, then their sorcery that they performed in Exodus 7 and 8 would certainly explain how this calf popped out of this thing and why that delay tactic failed and why he moved on to another delay tactic, building an altar and that kind of thing. So I want to get into practical application before we run out of time here. So there are people today that you probably would know about. We have our missionaries, and I won't name them, but we have our missionaries, and there are other people in different parts of the world that do not have the freedom that we have. They have to be careful where they worship and how they share the gospel. And I can tell you in the country Togo, which is in Africa, there's a man named Abraham who was severely beaten by sorcerers because he became a Christian and hospitalized. And well, what does he do? He's more of a Hur kind of guy. He stays there, and he's under constant threat of being killed. And in Nigeria, there's this whole family that escaped an attack from Islamic militants, and their apartment was burned, the husband was killed, and well, what did they do? Well, they left. Okay, they're not there anymore. They're not staying. They're in a camp now for internally displaced people, and that's where they are. The wife and the kids are there, is the last I heard. So there's different ways that you can handle the situation there. In Bangladesh, there's a guy named Juhel who was ambushed for sharing the faith, sharing his testimony. And he was beaten so much that it required multiple surgeries. And his response, I'm not going to flee. I'm not going to hide. I'm going to stay right here. Okay? And then you've got another person in India, a pastor of a church there, who was harassed, arrested on false charges. How did he respond? He ministers quietly in people's homes. Okay, so different responses, like Aaron and Hur and Moses were in this situation that's impossible. And we have today people having to make up their mind how to respond in these kinds of situations. That's just a few people. So the conclusion that I reach from all this is that there are really simple here. 2 main responses about leading or directing ourselves in the midst of sin around and within us. There's 2 main responses. There's one that's like Hur's approach, is you stand firm and you confront sin directly, no matter what it costs you. Even if it costs you your life, you stand firm and you can do that. That is one response. and he was martyred, okay? Then there's the Aaron's approach that we see in here, is that he adapted. He adapted like the pastor in India is more like the Aaron approach, that you adapt, you strive to minimize the harm to yourself and to other people and the people that care about you, but you remain faithful to God. You don't compromise don't just reinterpret the Bible, none of that. But you adapt to the circumstances, and maybe you would worship in your homes, okay? And so we did this during the COVID. We had church in our homes instead of other churches. They didn't. They came right up and they just kept on doing it anyway and come together. And so the challenge here from all this is to ask you a question. How are you navigating the sin around and within you? Are you more like Hur, stand your ground and no matter what costs you? Or are you more like Aaron? Are you adapting to the circumstances around you and staying faithful to what God wants you to do? And so the challenge that I have here as we wrap up our time, the next slide there, is what I can see from Aaron and Hur and the people today is which direction you take is not as important as who's doing the driving. Okay? I mean, if I decide I'm going to stay in this place where I might be killed for sharing the faith, it needs to be that God's directing me to do that. Okay? If God wants me, I want to use you long term. I don't want you to be here. I want you to go somewhere else. Then that's okay too. Then it's who's driving your influence? Who's influencing the decisions that you make? Some of us are here longer than others, but we're all here to do what we can do for God while we can. And the quantity of days that God gives us, that we get from God, is not as important as the quality of the days lived for God. That's what I want to share with you this evening. Thank you.